Good morning. You're watching All You Need to Know on BloombergQuint Live, and I'm Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. Hubei province reports fewer cases of the coronavirus on Wednesday as China changes its counting methodology yet again. The death toll currently stands at 2,112. The International Monetary Fund remains optimistic on global growth rebounding this year. The latest note, however, warns of risks to global growth, including the coronavirus. Bharti Chairman Sunil Bharti Mittal says that the government should focus on the sustainability of the telecom sector as it has been under stress for the last 3.5 years. Both Mittal and Kumar Mangalam Birla met Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman over the AGR dues on Wednesday. Oil prices have climbed to the highest level this month after concerns arise over supply disruptions in Libya and Venezuela. And food ordering and delivery platform Swiggy raises $113 million in its latest round of funding from existing investors. It aims to utilize the funds to develop new lines of business. Let's talk about the US markets now. They shrugged off Tuesday's weakness in trade overnight. Benchmark indices ended with gains led by outperformance from the Nasdaq. The tech-heavy index reported its second straight all-time closing high. Sue Keenan of Bloomberg News tells you what occurred in that Wall Street session in this report.
This latest session on Wall Street saw stocks rise across the board. Equities advanced for two key reasons. One, signals out of China that new efforts at stimulus, specifically bailing out hard-hit industries because of the economic slowdown resulting from the virus outbreak, is going to take place. And signals from the Federal Reserve that an increase in interest rates will not happen anytime soon. Among the groups that led the advance, banks and chip stocks. They helped lead the S&P 500 and the Nasdaq to fresh highs. Meanwhile, the dollar climbed to a 4-month high, and that was after that fresh economic data was very bullish on the housing front. Housing starts and building permits came in well above expectations. We saw bond yields hold steady, and that was after minutes from the Federal Reserve, which were released late in the afternoon. Minutes from the most recent meeting show that the FOMC members believe that current monetary policy is adequate for the time being. Notably, gold traded at its highest since 2013. So in sum, investors appear relatively confident of policymakers to at least contain any economic fallout from the virus outbreak. And that's even after Apple earlier in the week spooked investors here by warning it would not meet its sales targets. To quote one strategist, housing is an economic bellwether, and seeing bullish data like we saw in this latest session gives investors a lot of reasons to be optimistic, at least about the U.S. market. In New York, Sue Keenan, Bloomberg News.
Right, Hubei, which is the province at the center of the coronavirus epidemic, has reported a sharp decline in new cases. This after China revised the methodology of detecting new cases yet again. The cases outside China, though, are rising, with the total cases in South Korea now rising to 82. Tom McKenzie and Yvonne Mann of Bloomberg News bring you the latest on the outbreak.
They seem to be delayed, the national numbers. The Hubei numbers, 349 additional infections that have been confirmed, and under the new methodology they release confirmed infection rates and then suspected infection rates. And what we're hearing is the suspected rate is around 880. Now, if you combine the two data sets, then you still get a total number that is below the almost 1,700 infections that we got yesterday. So it seems to suggest, at least, again, on the surface, with all the caveats around the quality of this data and the transparency, it seems to confirm that the trend of falling infections does continue. In terms of the total global infections, you're looking at 75,000, at least 75,000 now. And of course, the concerns will be focused on the expansion in infections that you're seeing in countries like South Korea, of course, and Yvonne can give more detail on that. The death rate now above 2,000. And again, talking about the methodology change, it does just lead to more questions, really, as to how China's been handling this. It did change the methodology last week. Now it's gone back to the suspected and confirmed cases, and we'll have to see whether this does give more clarity as to how far this virus has spread.
Yvonne, as Tom alluded to, we are seeing these infections rise outside of China. There are fears growing with the cruise passengers that are heading back home, both arriving in Hong Kong as well as Australia this morning. But let's talk through the South Korea story, because we have seen a really substantial spike in the number of cases that have been confirmed. And again, it's this scenario where it's one single patient with potentially, access to 1,000 people at this church worship session.
Yeah, a massive jump to 82, as you mentioned. Just yesterday, we were reporting a total of 58. And just a couple of days ago, it was about 30. So why we were seeing a more than doubling of the numbers in just a matter of days, as you mentioned, it was tied to this cult where 1,000 people attended this worship service. And they said that several people contracted this disease from one patient. So unclear if this recent spike is tied to this one cult alone. But the president, South Korean President Moon Jae-in, did mention that the impact from this coronavirus could be bigger and longer lasting than what South Korea faced during the MERS outbreak back in 2015, where 38 people were killed, died in that country. Meanwhile, you mentioned about Hong Kong. Well, it seems like more than 100 people are returning home from that Diamond Princess cruise here in the city, but they've got a quarantine ahead. Presume they just landed a couple of minutes ago on the airport tarmac, and now they'll be heading into a quarantine at a public housing unit. But a total of 53 Hong Kong people were tested positive for this coronavirus on that Diamond Princess. That's out of the 621 cases overall.
All right, the 9th Democratic presidential debate begins in Nevada in the United States in just a few hours from now. Democratic candidates have already begun taking potshots at Michael Bloomberg, who will be participating in his first debate. Kevin Cirilli of Bloomberg News brings us an update from the venue of the debate.
Typically, anytime there's a front runner, in this case, Senator Bernie Sanders, the independent senator from Vermont who caucuses with the Democrats, they get all of the incoming fire. But with the addition of former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg on the stage, he's really going to be taking the brunt of the political attacks, which is good news for frontrunner Bernie Sanders. That said, the second point that I would make is that the sources that I speak with connected to and in Bernie Sanders' presidential campaign say they welcome the addition of Bloomberg on the stage. They want to draw a contrast in every which way against the former New York City mayor. The third point that I would make is that there's also openings now for the other candidates, including former Vice President Joe Biden, who would look to say that he is the unifying candidate of the bunch. In addition to Senator Amy Klobuchar, who is riding high off of that momentum in a third-place finish in New Hampshire, Elizabeth Warren, former South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg as well. Buttigieg in particular, who really had the strong showing in Iowa and New Hampshire, is someone who is going to say, hey, don't forget about me. He's someone who he feels could have momentum carrying into the Nevada caucus on Saturday, as well as South Carolina after that.
So what should we be watching out for when it comes to the change in tones in these debates? Because at first we went with the Democratic candidates really being reserved when it came to personal attacks, and that started to change.
Yeah, it's like a dysfunctional family, as we're used to in American politics at this point in the race. But all kidding aside, I think you have to look at where the polls are moving. There was a Morning Consult poll that was just released within the last 12 hours, which suggests that among likely Democratic voters, Bernie Sanders is actually the most of the likely Democratic voters that they view as the most electable. And then beyond that, just based upon my reporting, I don't see any of the candidates dropping out of this race between now and Super Tuesday, just because there just seems to be this baked-in sense of volatility that has been baked into, and unpredictability that has been baked into the crop of candidates at this point.
All right, let's see what else is making headlines across the globe. Sue Keenan is back to tell you all about the first word headlines.
The EU, which has unveiled a new strategy for deploying artificial intelligence and other emerging technologies in Europe. The legislative plans impose new rules and tests on U.S. and well as Chinese firms that want to deploy similar technologies in Europe. Companies like Facebook and Google will not be exempt. The move is the latest attempt by the EU to leverage its vast developed market, as well as compete with the U.S. and China's high-tech power. Lawyers for Julian Assange claim that President Trump was prepared to offer the WikiLeaks founder a pardon if he agreed to say Russia was not involved in leaking Democrat emails ahead of the 2016 elections. The emails, which embarrassed Hillary Clinton, were hacked and then published on WikiLeaks. Assange is fighting extradition to the U.S. on spying charges. The White House has called the claims a total lie. China, meanwhile, has expelled 3 reporters from the Wall Street Journal in a rare move to punish multiple reporters for an opinion piece that were not involved in. Now, the decision was made after the journal refused to apologize for what Beijing called a racially discriminatory op-ed. The opinion piece, which was written by a U.S.-based academic, described China as the, quote, sick man of Asia, which is a derogatory phrase used by European powers back in the 19th century. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Sue Keenan. This is Bloomberg.
All right, let's turn to the trade setup for the day in India. Agam Vakil is joining me to tell you all about that and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Agam, the signs look positive globally, but we had quite a decent rally in yesterday's session.
Yeah.
Is that momentum likely to continue this morning?
Well, Alex, tomorrow is a holiday, so this is, well, technically the last trading day of the week, which is why we may see unwinding of positions. That's where I'm getting at. And, well, the S6 for now is, looking at little no movement for now. As far as yesterday's day of trade is concerned, we did snap a 4-day gaining streak. We did see good advances on the Nifty as well as the broader markets, and it was the same for the banking indices too, which also advanced in yesterday's day of trade. For now, however, when it comes to the ADRs, and let's pull that up as well, it's a mixed picture. We don't have too much going in for, considering we don't have as much movement for well over 1%. But moving on to your fund flows, and that is something that we were watching out for, considering we saw gains coming through. Not too much from FIs, but domestic institutions did buy stock worth 590 odd crores on a net basis. Moving on to contributors, let's see where we saw that strength come in. So while we did have your usual suspects like Reliance Industries, HDFC Bank and HDFC, well, contribute to the gains. It was across that we saw a lot of advances, which is why the Nifty eventually landed up with a gain of around 133 points. Coming down to the futures and options space, have things changed? Considering we saw a lot more declines in the past few days, not really when it comes to the decline in open interest. We continue to see unwinding, considering a drop around 3.5% in the Nifty futures, and the Bank Nifty futures looking at a decline of around 4.3%. Moving on, we are talking about the range once again moving and from a 200-300 point range to a 500 point range based on maximum open interest, considering your open interest from the 12,200 mark has gone back to the 12,500 call. So that's something that we need to keep an eye on. But I reckon that for now, 12,000 will provide a little bit of a support in the near term. And that's evident in the kind of writing that we saw around the 12,000 and the 12,100 puts as well. In terms of the India Volatility Index, that came off by around 3.4% at 14. The Nifty put call ratio as well, at around 1.38 against 1.1, so edging up higher. And as far as stocks are concerned, again, watching out for Volta, Storm Pharma, and Mindtree. Mindtree, what an up move it's seeing. It's back above the mark of 1,000 rupees per share. A lot of longs there. In terms of stocks which are seeing unwinding, let's pull that up as well. Coal India, NMDC, and Ramco Cement. So we'll be watching out for some of these names, Alex, but I reckon we could see some consolidation come through today.
Thanks so much for that, Agam. All right, Nikki Mirchandani is here to tell you all about the stocks and news. Nikki, what do you have for us?
Sure, a couple of them. I'm going to start off with Axis Bank first because this one is big. The bank is is all set to pick up 20% stake in Max Life Insurance. That's the ET exclusive that we have. To pick up the stake through fresh issuance of equity. Now remember, Axis Bank already contributes to around 54% of Max Life Insurance revenue. So it's going to be a strategic alliance for that matter. We're also looking at Reliance Industry, which is at the moment assessing US sanction implication on Rosneft unit. The company has already complied with, it said that it's going to be more than willing to comply with the US rule in its dealings with Rosneft, and the entire purchase of this crude oil has already been permitted by the US government. We're also looking at Sterlite Technology, where there is an order win to an extent of around 1,500 crore. It's a new booking which is coming from an European telecom player, and the order ranges from optical connectivity and network services. Infibeam Avenues, that's another one on our list. It's going to be foraying into digital payments business in USA. It's already got its presence in India and UAE, so that's going to be adding in another geography. US e-commerce retail sales have grown roughly around 14 to 15% in the first 9 months of this financial year, so clearly giving some sort of trend to what the revenues could look like going forward in this geography as a whole. Bulk deal, we're looking at Religer Enterprises, where Resonance Opportunity Fund, that particular fund has picked in more than or close to a % stake in the counter. On the selling side, you have Axis Bank, which is sold in 1.12% stake in this counter.
All right, Nikki, thanks for that. Let's take you through some of the stories you'll find on the website BloombergQuint.com if you were to take a look as of now. First up, the National Company Law Tribunal has reserved its order on a plea by a former director of Divan Housing Finance Corporation seeking to allow him to be a part of the Committee of Creditors meetings. The two-member bench of the NCLT has declined to pass any interim direction or provide any immediate relief to Dheeraj Wadhawan, but reserved the matter for orders. And food ordering and delivery platform Swiggy on Wednesday said it has raised $113 million in the latest round of funding led by existing investor Process NV. Meituan Dianping and a Wellington Management Company have also participated in the funding round. Well, that's all we have for you in this edition of All You Need to Know, but clearly there's lots to look at on the website BloombergQuint.com, and I would encourage you to do just that. Thanks so much for watching. This is Bloomberg Quint.